Hi. We shall continue the lecture by the hypnotist Doloris, and it is about 2 hours. And I recorded and commented about 1 hour. And the basic is that the consciousness, which is the energy, which is the electromagnetic field, it is there to start with. And then we, as material, created in this consciousness, like the stars, everything. This is how we are created. This is what she said. So, and we have electromagnetic field within us, for example, in the brain, in the heart. And these waves, we could detect it in medicine by EEG. We put electrodes on the brain and we could record it, as well as in the heart, which is called ECG, electrocardiograph. Okay, and this energy, it could emit outside 5 feet. Each feet is 30 centimeter. You could say about 90 centimeter by 5, 450 centimeter is almost 5 meter. You could affect the reality around you. So if you have positive energy and positive thoughts, and you are healthy, and you do gratitude, and you love yourself and others, and you have compassion, in that case the energy is in coherence. It is ordered. It is positive. So when it is emitted or go outside your body, the environment around you will be positive. And you see life different from somebody who has negative emotions or negative thinking, or greed, or wars, or killing, and depression, and anxiety, and panic attack, all these things. The electricity in the brain and that will be disordered. Then you have discoherence or incoherence. In Latin, in mean is not good. Dis mean dysfunctional, doesn't work well. So this energy which is emitted around you, it will be negative and will attract negative. You try to avoid people. You have to attract people who are no good. I mean, so many women, they get married, they get divorced, they get married again, they get divorced. They don't know why, but they attract husbands who are no good. Okay, so we have to follow this, because really this is first time I'm going to continue listening to it with you, and I will explain, because I am a doctor and I understand what's going on.
I swear by God, Tigadia's shampoo will make you grow new hair in 2 weeks. If no new hair grows, we will compensate you $20,000.
Recognize or know how to support. Once she understood what she truly was, once she learned to protect her energy and use her gifts consciously, the symptoms that had plagued her for 15 years began to dissolve. No medication could have done what that understanding did. This is what I mean when I say we're not broken. So many of you have been told there's something wrong with you, when really you're just operating at a different frequency than the world around you. You're not too sensitive, the world is too numb, you're not too emotional, others are too disconnected, you're not broken, you're breaking through. And here's what I need you to understand. Breaking through doesn't mean you become perfect. It doesn't mean you suddenly transcend all human emotion and float above it all in some blissful state of permanent enlightenment. That's a fantasy sold by people who've never actually done the work. Breaking through means you become time's real asterisk. You start seeing through the performances everyone's putting on. You start recognizing when you're lying to yourself. You catch yourself mid-pattern and think, wait, why am I doing this? You begin to question not just what you believe, but times why, times you believe it, and times who taught you times to believe it. I've watched this happen in my sessions over and over again. Someone goes under, accesses a past life where they were, let's say, a monk who took a vow of poverty and suffered tremendously because of it. And suddenly, in their current life, they realize why they've been sabotaging every opportunity for financial abundance. The The past life belief system is time still running times in the background like old software. But once they see it, once they consciously recognize the pattern, they can choose differently. This is the power you have right now, not someday when you're more evolved, not after you've read 10 more books or done 5 more courses. Asterisk, right now. Asterisk. Every moment you're aware, you're choosing. Even choosing not to choose is a choice. Even staying stuck is a decision you're making, whether you realize it or not. And I know that sounds harsh. I know some of you are thinking, but Doloris, I times want times to change. I've been times trying times to change. I hear you, but wanting and trying aren't the same as deciding. When you truly decide, your entire reality shifts to accommodate that decision. Doors open, people appear, opportunities emerge from nowhere, not because the universe is rewarding you, but because your times, finally times, in alignment with what you've been asking for all along. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your vibration. And your vibration is determined by what you truly believe about yourself at the deepest level. When I was working with clients, I would often ask them to describe what they wanted. They would say things like, I want abundance, I want love, I want success. Beautiful words. But then I would take them into trance and we would explore their subconscious beliefs. And do you know what we found? The exact opposite programming running underneath. A woman would say she wanted love, but buried in her subconscious was the belief that she wasn't worthy of it. That love always led to pain. That people always left. So what do you think the universe was responding to? Not her conscious desire, not her affirmations, but that deep vibration of unworthiness and fear. This is why so many of you feel stuck. You're speaking one language with your mouth and another with your soul. And the universe only hears the soul. You cannot vibrate lack and receive abundance. You cannot vibrate fear and receive love. You cannot vibrate limitation and receive expansion. It's not possible. It's like trying to tune into a radio station on the wrong frequency. The station is broadcasting, but you're not aligned to receive it. So the question becomes, how do you change that vibration? How do you shift what you truly believe at the deepest level? And here's where most people get it wrong. They think they have to convince themselves. They think they have to force positive thoughts. They think they have to override their doubts with willpower. But that's just creating more resistance. That's just layering new beliefs on top of old ones without actually transforming anything. The real shift happens when you go into the root, when you find where those limiting beliefs came from in the first place. Because I promise you, they're not yours. You weren't born believing you were unworthy. You weren't born believing you were limited. You weren't born believing you weren't enough. Those beliefs were planted by experiences, by pain, by misunderstanding your purpose for being here. And once you see them for what they are, just old programming, not truth, they begin to dissolve. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to hate yourself for having them. That's what the old teachings told you, to resist, to battle, to conquer yourself like you're some kind of enemy. But that keeps you stuck. That keeps you locked in war with your own soul. The real transformation happens when you turn toward those fears with curiosity, with gentleness, when you ask, what are you trying to protect me from? Because every fear, no matter how distorted, began as an attempt to keep you safe. The fear of being visible, it once protected you from persecution. The fear of speaking your truth, it kept you from being punished when silence was survival. But you're not in those lifetimes anymore. You're here, now. in a body that is capable of holding more light than ever before. And those old protective mechanisms, they're like armor you no longer need. Heavy, restrictive, keeping you from moving freely in this new landscape. So you can thank them, acknowledge what they did for you, and then gently, consciously set them down. I've watched thousands of people do this work, not in my office, but in their own quiet moments, in meditation, in journaling, in sitting with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. And what happens is always the same. The fear doesn't disappear immediately, but its grip loosens, its voice gets quieter, and in that space, something else emerges. Your true nature, the part of you that existed before the wounds, before the conditioning, before you learned to be small or acceptable or safe. That aspect of you is still there, intact, waiting. It never left. It was just buried under layers of protection and forgetting. And as you peel those layers away, not violently, but with patience and presence, you start to remember who you actually are. Not who your parents needed you to be, not who society demanded, not who your wounded ego constructed to navigate a confusing world, but who you were designed to be before you incarnated here, the mission you signed up for, the frequency you came to embody, the specific medicine only you can offer. That's what this moment in human history is inviting us toward. Not another set of rules or beliefs to follow, not another guru to give your power away to, but a return to your own inner knowing, your own direct connection to Source. And here's what I've witnessed time and time again in my decades of this work. The moment someone truly grasps this, truly understands that they are not separate from Source, not waiting for permission, not needing an intermediary, everything shifts. I've watched people who've been carrying crushing guilt for lifetimes suddenly release it. I've seen individuals who've been searching for their purpose through every spiritual tradition, every workshop, every teacher, and then they connect with their higher self, and the answer was there all along. Simple, clear, undeniable. Because you see, your higher self already knows why you're here. It knows what you came to do. It knows what you came to heal. It knows what you came to remember. The sessions I've done over the years, they're not performances. They're not entertainment. They're profound journeys where people touch the truth of who they really are. And when they come back from that deep trance state, when they open their eyes, there's often this look, this recognition, like they've just remembered something they always knew but had forgotten. One woman came to me carrying the weight of a childhood she could barely speak about, abuse, abandonment, the kind of pain that shapes every relationship, every choice, every moment of your adult life. And in her session, she accessed a lifetime where she had been the perpetrator of similar violence, not to justify what happened to her in this life, but to understand the soul contract, to see the bigger picture. She saw how her current abuser had agreed, on a soul level, to play that role so she could experience what she herself had once inflicted, to balance the karma, to learn compassion from the inside out. Now, I know this is challenging. I know some of you are thinking, are you saying we choose to be abused? That we ask for trauma? And no, that's not quite it. The personality, the human self, never chooses suffering. But the soul chooses experiences that will lead to growth, understanding, and ultimately evolution. When she understood this, when she truly got it, the hatred she'd been carrying for decades began to dissolve, not because what happened was okay, but because she could finally see it through the lens of soul purpose rather than victim and perpetrator. She forgave, not just him, herself, and that's when the real healing began. When you forgive yourself for the role you played, even if that role was simply believing you weren't worthy of better, you break the chain. You stop passing that wound forward. You stop teaching your children that love requires suffering. You stop accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole feast. I've watched this transformation happen during sessions. A woman comes to me burdened by years of staying in something that was slowly killing her spirit. And when we go back, when we access those deeper memories, we discover she made a soul agreement before birth, not to suffer endlessly, mind you, but to learn about her own strength, to discover she could stand on her own, to recognize that leaving doesn't make her a failure, it makes her free. The soul never judges the human experience as harshly as we judge ourselves. Never. Your higher self looks at you with such compassion, such understanding. It knows you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time. It knows you were brave just for trying, for hoping, for loving, even when that love wasn't returned in the way you deserved. And here's what shifts everything. Understanding that the other person's behavior was never about you. Their inability to show up to meet you with honesty, to honor what you built together. That was their journey, their wound, their lesson. You were simply the mirror they couldn't bear to look into. You reflected back to them everything they were running from in themselves. When you truly understand this, the obsession ends. The midnight wondering stops. The need to know why, to understand what you could have done differently, to fix what was broken, it dissolves. Because you realize you were never the problem. You were the catalyst, the awakener, the one brave enough to love fully while they were still learning what love even means. And here's what most people won't tell you. That person you loved, the one who couldn't meet you where you stood, they're going to remember you for the rest of their life. Years from now, when they've finally done their own healing work, when they finally learn to be present, to be vulnerable, to show up fully in love, they're going to think of you. They're going to realize what they had. They're going to understand, perhaps for the first time, the magnitude of what you offered them. I've worked with people on the other side of this equation. People who came to me years after they let someone special go, carrying the weight of that regret like a stone in their chest. And they all say the same thing. I didn't know. I wasn't ready. I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You were the standard, the benchmark. Every person they encounter after you will be measured against the memory of your love, your patience, your depth. You became the one that got away. Not because you left, but because they weren't ready to receive what you were offering. But here's what you need to understand right now, while you're still in the raw, tender space of loss. Their future awakening doesn't require your presence. Your job wasn't to wait around until they figured it out. Your job was to love authentically, to show them what's possible, and then to honor yourself enough to walk away when that love wasn't reciprocated in the way you deserved. This is the part where your soul work deepens, because the universe isn't done with you, not even close. What you experience, this profound catalyst relationship, it cracked you open in ways you didn't know were possible. And now, standing in this open, vulnerable space, you have a choice. You can close back up, build walls higher than before, tell yourself that loving deeply only leads to pain. Or you can stay open, you can integrate this experience, extract the lessons, honor the growth, and trust that this breaking open was actually a breaking through. The choice isn't about forgetting what happened, it's about deciding who you become because of it. And here's what I've witnessed time and time again in the souls I've worked with, those who choose to stay open, even after devastation. They're the ones who eventually experience love at depths they never imagined possible. Not because they found someone perfect, but because they themselves became more expansive, more authentic, more whole. You see, when you've loved and lost, you gain something precious that can never be taken from you. You gain proof that you're capable of profound connection. You gain evidence that your heart works, that it can stretch beyond itself, that you contain capacities you didn't know existed. That doesn't disappear just because the person left. That expansion is yours now. It's permanent. Think about it this way. Before this relationship, you might have wondered if you could truly love someone unconditionally. Now you know you can. You might have questioned whether you could be vulnerable, whether you could show up fully, whether you could prioritize someone else's happiness. Now you have your answer. These capacities don't belong to the relationship. They belong to you. They're part of your spiritual infrastructure now. And from the soul's perspective, that's the whole point. Your soul didn't incarnate to find one person and coast for 70 years. It came to discover its own vastness through every relationship, every connection, every heartbreak, every healing. It came to learn what it's made of. And now you know you're made of something incredibly resilient, something that can shatter and reform, something that contains both devastating grief and startling joy, sometimes in the same afternoon. The souls I've regressed often speak about their most painful lifetimes with this quality of reverence. They say things like, "That was the life where I learned real courage," or "That incarnation taught me the difference between loving and attaching." They see the bigger picture, how that specific pain shaped them into something more refined, more capable, more conscious. I've watched subjects in deep trance describe their hardest incarnations with tears streaming down their faces, not tears of regret, but something closer to awe. They weep because they finally understand why they chose it, why they agreed to be the child who didn't fit in, the partner who was abandoned, the artist whose work was never recognized in their lifetime. From the soul's perspective, these weren't punishments or cosmic mistakes. They were precisely calibrated experiences designed to crack open parts of themselves that couldn't have opened any other way. One woman I regressed remembered planning her most difficult life between incarnations. She saw herself in what she called the selection room, reviewing potential scenarios with her guides. She had been working on self-worth issues across multiple lifetimes, always approaching it from angles of privilege and validation. This time, she chose differently. She selected a life where she would be repeatedly overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, where her genuine brilliance would go unrecognized for decades. I asked her why she would choose something so painful. Her answer, channeled from that higher state, was crystalline, because being valued by others was keeping me from valuing myself. I needed a lifetime where external validation was withheld, so I'd be forced to find the real source inside me. That's the sacred mathematics of suffering. It's not random, it's not punishment, it's precision engineering for consciousness expansion. And here's what makes it even more profound. You're not alone in that engineering. Before you incarnated, you collaborated with other souls to create the exact circumstances you needed. That difficult parent, they agreed to play that role for you, often taking on something challenging for their own evolution in the process. That betrayal that shattered you, planned at a soul level, with full consent from both parties because you both needed to learn different aspects of the same lesson. The person who abandoned you when you needed them most, they agreed to be the catalyst that would force you to discover your own inner strength, to realize that you never needed saving in the first place. The parent who couldn't give you the love you craved, their soul signed up to teach you that your worth doesn't come from external validation, that you are complete without anyone's approval. This doesn't make the pain less real. It doesn't mean you shouldn't feel what you feel or process what you've experienced. But it does mean that on some level, beneath the human drama and emotion, there was an agreement, a sacred contract written before birth, designed to crack you open so the light could get in. And here's what makes it even more profound. These souls who agreed to play the difficult roles, the villains in your story, they took on something incredibly heavy for their own growth too. Because playing the betrayer, the abandoner, the one who causes pain, that creates karma, that creates lessons they'll have to work through. They loved you enough at a soul level to take on that burden, knowing it would help you evolve. Think about that for a moment. Really let it sink in. The people who hurt you the most might have loved you the most at a soul level. They sacrificed their own easy path to help you find yours. That's the kind of love that exists beyond this physical realm. That's the kind of agreement that gets made when souls truly see each other. Now, some of you might be thinking, but what about free will? If everything is pre-planned, do we have any choice at all? And this is where it gets beautifully complex. You planned the major themes, the significant encounters, the lessons you wanted to learn. But how you respond to those situations, that's your free will in action. You chose the curriculum before you came here. But you're taking the test in real time without the answers in front of you. And here's what really blew my mind during the sessions. When people would go back and review their life plans with their higher selves, they'd see moments of what looked like terrible luck or random tragedy. And almost every time, they'd realize they had specifically chosen that experience, not as punishment, as an opportunity. I remember a woman who'd lost her husband suddenly in a car accident. She was devastated, angry at God, angry at the universe. Under hypnosis, she went to the planning stage before this life, and she saw herself actually requesting that experience. She wanted to learn about resilience, about finding her own strength instead of depending on someone else for her identity. Her husband's soul was there too, in the planning session. He agreed to play that role for her, to exit early so she could learn what she needed to learn. When she came out of the session, she wasn't magically healed of her grief, but she understood it differently. She could see the gift inside the loss. That's free will operating at the highest level. She couldn't choose whether her husband died, but she could choose how that experience would transform her. Think about the people in your life who've gone through hell and came out completely transformed. They didn't just survive their challenges. They used them as rocket fuel for their evolution. That's someone using their free will to extract wisdom from pain. That's someone remembering on some level why they chose this particular curriculum. Your soul didn't come here to cruise through an easy life. It came here to grow. And growth requires resistance. You can't build muscle without lifting something heavy. You can't develop courage without facing something that scares you. You can't learn forgiveness without being hurt by someone. So when you ask whether your life is predetermined or whether you have free will, the answer is both. And the beautiful part, the part that changes everything, is that you have way more control than you think. Not control over what happens to you, control over who you become through what happens to you. That's the difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck. The stuck ones keep asking, Why did this happen to me? The growing ones ask, what can I become because of this? I've watched this transformation happen over and over again in my sessions. Someone comes to me carrying decades of pain, convinced their story is written in stone. And then we go back. We look at the agreements they made before they were born, and suddenly everything shifts. They see that the parent who abandoned them wasn't a villain in their story. They were a teacher. The betrayal that shattered their trust wasn't random cruelty. It was a precisely calibrated experience designed to teach them discernment, to show them the difference between authentic connection and superficial attachment. The job loss that felt like failure, it was redirecting them toward their actual purpose. The illness that brought them to their knees, it was forcing them to finally listen to their body, to honor their limits, to stop running from themselves. This doesn't mean you have to feel grateful for your pain. That's spiritual bypassing, and it's garbage. You're allowed to feel angry. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to say, this was hard and it hurt, and I wish it hadn't happened. But here's what I want you to understand. You can acknowledge the pain and still claim the growth. Both things can be true at the same time. You can say, that experience broke me open, and also say, and through that breaking, I found parts of myself I never knew existed. This is where free will becomes sacred, because yes, your soul chose the curriculum, but you get to choose how you move through it. You get to choose whether you harden or soften, whether you close down or open up, whether you become bitter or become wise. Every single day, you're making these choices. Most of them are small, tiny moments where you decide how to respond to frustration, disappointment, joy, connection. And here's what I've observed in thousands of sessions. The people who transform their timelines aren't necessarily making dramatically different choices. They're making slightly times different ones. Consistently, it's the person who pauses for 3 seconds before responding in anger, the one who chooses to see their partner's criticism as fear rather than attack, the one who decides that this setback is information, not identity. These micro choices create ripples, and those ripples compound. I've seen people completely change their trajectory by implementing what I call the 2% shift. You don't overhaul your entire life overnight. You adjust your responses by just 2%. You bring 2% more awareness to your reactions. You choose 2% more compassion when you want to choose judgment. 2% seems insignificant, but here's the mathematics of consciousness. Small shifts in high-frequency moments create exponential change over time. Think about it. If you encounter 20 moments today where you could respond from fear or from love, and you shift just 2% of those responses, that's daily practice. That's timeline modification in real time. The subjects who returned to that fork in the road didn't see some massive, obvious alternative. They saw themselves making slightly different choices, pausing slightly longer, asking one additional question, taking one different action, and from that minuscule shift, an entirely different life unfolded. This is why I'm so passionate about recording these sessions, these discoveries. Because once you understand that your timeline isn't fixed, that those alternate versions aren't fantasies but actual potential realities you can still access, everything changes. You stop being a victim of your past. You become the architect of your present. And the present, remember, is where all timelines converge. This moment right here, this is your access point. This is where you have power. The question isn't, what if I had chosen differently back then? The question is, what am I choosing right now? Because right now, there's a version of you making a different choice. And the more you align with the frequency of the life you want to live, the more you collapse into that timeline. You're not chasing some future self. You're becoming the version that already exists. This is why affirmations alone don't work, because you're saying the words from the old vibration. You're declaring, I am abundant, while your body is still carrying the frequency of lack. That's like trying to tune into a jazz station while your dial is stuck on static. You have to feel it first. You have to embody the state. That's what I discovered in all those sessions. The people who healed weren't the ones who just visualize. They were the ones who let their entire nervous system shift into the reality where healing had already happened. And here's what makes this even more powerful. When you shift your frequency, you don't just change your future, you change your past. Because time isn't a straight line moving forward. It's a spiral. And from a higher frequency, you can reach back and rewrite the meaning of everything that happened to you. That trauma you experience, from this new vibration, it becomes the catalyst for your awakening. That betrayal, it becomes the moment you learn to trust yourself. That failure, it becomes the redirection that saved your life. You're not erasing what happened, you're changing the energetic charge around it. And when the charge changes, the entire timeline reorganizes itself. You start noticing things you didn't see before. Patterns that were invisible become obvious. Doors that were always there suddenly swing open. I've watched people do this in real time. A woman came to me carrying decades of grief over a relationship that ended. Through the work, she shifted into a frequency where that ending was the greatest gift she'd ever received. And within weeks, her entire life reflected that new truth, new love, new opportunities, new versions of herself she didn't know existed. This is the alchemy. You're not waiting for life to change so you can feel better. You're changing your frequency so life has no choice but to reorganize around you. Because reality isn't happening to you. It's responding to the signal you're broadcasting every single moment. And here's what most people miss. They think frequency is something you tune into once and you're done, like a radio station you set and forget. But frequency isn't static, it's dynamic. It moves, it fluctuates with your attention, your emotion, your focus. Every single thought is either raising your frequency or lowering it. Every reaction, every conversation, every scroll through your phone. You want to know why meditation works? Not because it makes you spiritual, because it gives you conscious control over your frequency. When you sit in silence, you're not escaping reality. You're reprogramming the signal. You're clearing out the static. All those anxious thoughts, those loops of worry, those mental reruns of past conversations, that's interference. That's noise blocking your natural frequency. And when you clear the noise, something beautiful happens. You start to feel it, that hum, that aliveness. It's not dramatic. It's not a bolt of lightning. It's subtle. Like tuning a guitar string until it resonates perfectly. You feel lighter, clearer, more present. That's your true frequency. That's the signal your soul has been trying to broadcast all along. But here's where it gets really interesting. You don't have to meditate for hours to shift your frequency. You can do it right now, in this moment, with one simple choice. Pay attention to how you feel, not what you think about how you feel. Actually feel it. Where is the tension in your body? Where is the openness? That feeling is your frequency indicator. It's your internal tuning fork. When you feel contracted, heavy, tight, low frequency. When you feel expansive, light, flowing, high frequency. It's that simple. And once you know this, you have a superpower. You can course correct in real time Someone cuts you off in traffic and you feel that anger spike, you just dropped frequency. But you don't have to stay there. Breathe, soften, choose a different thought, and watch your frequency rise again. This is the game. This is what nobody teaches you. Life isn't about avoiding low frequencies. It's about recognizing them and choosing differently, because you always have a choice. Always, every single moment is a new opportunity to broadcast a new signal. And here's what I want you to understand about that signal. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be some massive life-altering shift overnight. You know what changes everything? The tiniest adjustment in your emotional frequency. I've seen people completely transform their reality by doing nothing more than choosing gratitude over complaint for 15 minutes a day. That's it. 15 minutes where they consciously shifted their attention from what was wrong to what was working. And their entire world reorganized itself around that new signal. Because here's the secret that nobody talks about. The universe doesn't respond to your affirmations. It doesn't care about your vision board or your manifestation journal. It responds to your vibrational state, to the emotional frequency you're actually broadcasting, not the one you're pretending to broadcast. You can say affirmations all day long, but if you're saying, I am wealthy, while feeling the anxiety of your unpaid bills, guess which signal the universe is receiving? The anxiety. Every single time. This is why so many people get frustrated with manifestation work. They're doing all the right things, visualizing, affirming, journaling, but they're doing it from a state of lack, from a frequency of, I don't have this yet and I need it. And that need, that desperation, that's the signal that keeps broadcasting. So they keep creating more experiences of needing and not having. The entire game changes when you understand this one principle. You have to feel it before you see it. Not think it, not visualize it, not hope for it. Feel it, embody it, become the vibrational match for it. When I work with people in trance states, I'm not helping them remember past lives for entertainment. I'm helping them access states of consciousness where they've already experienced what they're seeking now. Because somewhere, in some timeline, some version of you has already lived the life you're dreaming of, has already embodied the confidence you're seeking, has already experienced the love, the abundance, the peace you're reaching for. And when you can access that frequency, even for a moment, you create a bridge between that timeline and this one. Now, this isn't about positive thinking. This isn't about slapping affirmations on your mirror and hoping the universe delivers. This is about recognizing that every thought, every emotion, every belief you hold is a vibrational instruction. It's a signal that says, more of this, please. And the universe, or whatever term feels right for you, responds not to your words, but to your frequency. Here's the truth that many manifestation teachings miss. You cannot attract from a frequency you're not willing to embody. You can't desire wealth while simultaneously identifying as someone who struggles. You can't call in unconditional love while believing you're fundamentally unworthy. Not because the universe is judging you, not because you're doing it wrong, but because those two frequencies cannot coexist in the same space. It's like trying to tune your radio to 98.5 while staying locked on 101.3. You'll only hear the station you're actually tuned to, no matter how much you insist you want the other one. And this is where most people give up. They try to shift their frequency for a day, maybe a week. They visualize, they affirm, they do all the practices. But then, when the physical reality doesn't change immediately, they collapse back into the familiar frequency of lack, doubt, and struggle. They say, see, it doesn't work, nothing changes. But what they don't realize is that they abandoned the frequency before it could materialize. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You water it, you trust the process. You know that beneath the surface, invisible to your eyes, something is happening. Roots are forming, energy is gathering. And in time, if you maintain the right conditions, it breaks through the soil. Your frequency is the same. When you hold a new vibration consistently, things begin to shift beneath the surface of your awareness. Synchronicities appear, doors open, people show up. Opportunities that didn't exist before suddenly become visible, not because they weren't there, but because you weren't tuned to the frequency where they could reach you. I've seen this happen thousands of times. Someone finally makes peace with a difficult relationship, and within days, a job opportunity emerges in exactly the field they've been trying to break into for years. They stop resenting their body, and suddenly the health issue that baffled doctors begins to shift. They forgive themselves for a past mistake, and the creative block that had them stuck for months dissolves overnight. This isn't coincidence.